That's all from me until the papers. I'll be back at just after 10:30. Now, though, it's time to join Samira for Newswatch.
Hello and welcome to Newswatch with me, Samira. Ahmed. It's still showing the major speeches live, but why has the BBC stopped broadcasting the party political conferences in full? And by displaying Conservative slogans prominently on its conference set, was BBC News guilty of helping the party advertise itself? For years, encounters between Boris Johnson and BBC interviewers have provoked strong and polarised reactions. There were several such meetings this week, starting with the Andrew Marr show last Sunday.
After more than 10 years of flatlining, what you're seeing is people on low incomes being paid more. And by the way, here's an example of levelling up.
Can I come directly to that? Because you said something that isn't true, I'm afraid. You said something that isn't true about wages.
That wages are...
Liz Wright wondered, why do BBC journalists constantly talk over and interrupt their interviewees? A good interviewer should rightly question and challenge what is being said. However, not letting the Prime Minister answer the question first before interrupting is frustrating for the viewer, as well as, quite frankly, rude and disrespectful. But Janet Hargensen had a different perspective. Andrew Marr was simply trying to get Johnson to answer his questions, to stop the blathering. And there was a similar division of opinion over Nick Robinson's Radio 4 interview with Mr Johnson on Tuesday morning, the Prime Minister's first on the Today programme for over 2 years.
There's no supply of young people in this country who, frankly, at the moment, are thinking of becoming truck drivers.
You have made that point very clearly, and I'm going to make a new one.
That is going to change.
Prime Minister,
that is going to change, and it's going to be a good thing.
Stop talking. We are going to have questions and answers, not where you merely talk, if you wouldn't mind. Now, the question I now want to ask you is about the cost of living, if you would.
Giles Bedlow contacted us to say, I recognise that this interview was an opportunity to ask questions and obtain answers, not for Boris Johnson to make a speech, and that the interviewer therefore needed to be sharp and robust to keep Johnson on point. Nevertheless, there is no excuse for telling the Prime Minister to stop talking. It was rude and crude. But Jean Jeeves begged, please do not castigate Nick Robinson for asking Boris Johnson to stop talking in his recent interview. Mr Johnson rarely answers a straightforward question without shooting off at a tangent of his own choosing, unrelated to the question asked, and just talks over the interviewer. Those interviews were conducted at the Conservative Party conference, and several other programmes were also broadcast from there this week, most of them using the same location at the conference venue in Manchester. The set, in each case, was customised with the programme's logo, but also prominent in the wide camera shot on Newsnight, for example, were the Conservatives' slogans for the week: building back better, getting on with the job, and delivering on the people's priorities. They could also be seen on Politics Live, prompting Neil Farraher to ask on Monday, why is Politics Live giving free advertising to the Conservative Party? The following day, several viewers spotted those same slogans on breakfast, causing Jackie Baker to email, I would like an explanation as to why Conservative Party billboards with clear slogans formed the backdrop on BBC Breakfast. Why weren't these interviews held in an area without political billboards? Surely possible in such a huge venue. I don't think I've ever seen such blatant political propaganda on the BBC before. Well, the same issue arose to a lesser extent last week when the BBC set for programmes like Politics Live at the Labour conference included the party's logo and branding, but less prominently than with the Conservatives this week. We asked BBC News about this, and they told us. Interviews for the Conservative Party conference took place at the conference venue in Manchester, and therefore some interviews had Conservative Party branding in the background. Similarly, Labour Party branding was visible during interviews with Labour MPs at the Labour Party conference in Brighton. We covered both events with due impartiality. A number of BBC journalists and programmes had a presence at the Conservative Party conference this week, as they did last week for Labour. And in both cases, the major speeches were shown live on the news channel. But overall, there has been a considerable reduction in the BBC's conference coverage. In previous years, BBC Parliament has broadcast the major parties' annual gatherings in full, along with highlights of the smaller parties' conferences. But this time round, those tuning in to BBC Parliament were offered instead the proceedings of the Scottish and Welsh Parliaments and Northern Ireland Assembly, often repeats from debates on previous days, like this debate in the Scottish Parliament, shown this Monday, but actually from last Thursday.
For Colin Smith.
Thank you, President Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it will implement Part 3 of the Transport Scotland Act 2019 to allow local authorities to bring forward proposals to directly run bus services in their area.
Minister Graham Day.
President Officer, as I outlined in my letter to all members in June, work to implement Part 3 of the Act resumed earlier this year following a pause necessitated by the pandemic.
The reason for the change is money. The BBC has to make substantial savings, and as part of its programme of cuts, rolling coverage of the party conferences has ended for the first time since the 1960s. It's not clear exactly how much money this saves, given that the filming of the conferences is happening anyway and shared on a pooled basis between the BBC, ITN and Sky. And the decision went down badly with MPs when it emerged in the summer. The Conservative MP Damien Collins, for example, said at the time, "These cuts will have a massively detrimental impact to public service broadcasting." Now, viewers have been voicing their objections too. Writing last week, Graham Pearce thought it was disgraceful that the Labour Party conference isn't being televised live and in full. What's the BBC for if it isn't to cover important political events like this? Something should be done. British Alba made a similar point this week. A shame the BBC Parliament channel is not showing any live coverage and the Conservative live feed only for a few speeches. It risks missing people out. And Chairman Moe reminisced. "I remember when the whole thing was shown live on BBC Two. Now it doesn't even make BBC Parliament." Well, we really wanted to discuss this with an editor or executive from BBC News, but no one was available to talk to us. Instead, we were given this statement. As part of the BBC News modernisation plans, the coverage of the party political conferences has changed. BBC News continues to provide substantial coverage of the party conferences with political reporting across all platforms and news bulletins. Major speeches are broadcast live on the news channel with interviews and analysis from the conferences on Politics Live on BBC Two. This approach allows BBC Parliament to offer live coverage of the Scottish and Welsh Parliaments and Northern Ireland Assembly, which are not in recess during this period. Do let us know your thoughts on anything we're covering in this week's programme or on any aspect of BBC News. Details of how to contact us at the end of the programme. Now for some of your other concerns this week. It's almost 3 weeks since a volcano started erupting on the Spanish island of La Palma, and this week molten lava was continuing to pour out of it, with eruptions sending gas and ash almost 4 miles into the air. Hundreds of properties have been destroyed and thousands of people have fled their homes. Covering the story for the BBC has been Dan Johnson, who posted this tweet a couple of weeks ago, looking forward to a hopefully spectacular live update on the news at 10. At the time, Malcolm Tatham sent us this response. "Where people are losing their homes and possibly their livelihoods, I cannot imagine more crass and insensitive comments. It is disgraceful." Dan Johnson used that word spectacular in another tweet on Monday. And again, there was a negative reaction, with Yambag Yatsi writing, "People's homes are being destroyed with thousands evacuated, and you're talking about how spectacular the view is. Not a good look." Well, we put those objections to BBC News, and they told us. The full news report shows the latest updates from the La Palma volcano eruption, which is linked as part of a thread on Twitter. The report covers the impact on the local community and speaks to residents who are directly affected. There was another environment story closer to home on Tuesday's News at 6, as described by Sophie Rayworth.
There has been flash flooding in many parts of the UK after torrential rain overnight. In some places, it was up to a month's worth of rain, which fell in just hours. There was flash flooding in Pontypridd. The Fire and Rescue Service in South, Mid and West Wales said they've been inundated with calls for help.
Victoria Witchley was watching that and was not impressed. She writes, The anchorwoman was reporting on flooding in the town of Pontypridd, but made no effort to pronounce the name properly. This happens frequently when the BBC reports on events in Wales. This is now becoming extremely insulting, given that extreme care is given by your organisation to pronounce place names from abroad or non-British names properly in case of causing offence. Please address this issue. It's not difficult, and I'm sure Hugh Edwards can assist. Also feeling hard done by this week were a number of current and former Royal Air Force personnel who got in touch with us after watching reports like this on Monday's News at 6.
This is the Army helping out in the distribution of British petrol, even as there are wider post-lockdown supply chain challenges across the globe. These scenes are unique to Britain. For the government, alongside some new visas for drivers, this is an example of what the Chancellor referred to as whatever it takes to deal with problems in getting goods to market normally.
The line at the start of that clip, "This is the Army," was changed when the report went out at 10 o'clock to "This is the military," as the pictures actually showed members of the RAF, but not before this call to our telephone line.
I wonder whether you could kindly stop reporting that the Army is delivering the fuel. You'll find that it's all three services, predominantly the RAF, because they have a supply of tanker drivers who normally fuel aircraft. I am getting rather upset by the fact that the Army are getting all the credit. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you for all your comments this week. If you want to share your opinions about what you see or hear on BBC News, on TV, radio, online and social media, email newswatch@bbc.co.uk, or you can find us on Twitter @NewswatchBBC. You can call us on 0370 010 6676 and do have a look at our website for previous discussions, bbc.co.uk/newswatch. That's all from us. We'll be back to hear your thoughts about BBC News coverage again next week. Goodbye.